Hi, and welcome to DHF Elder Update. I'm Doug Harvey, Executive Director of DHF, and your host for these updates. A few years ago, I was on a mission trip in Kenya, out in the bush with a missionary family and a number of folks from the United States who'd come to do some building projects. One evening, after a day that hadn't been too strenuous, after supper, someone said, well, let's go for a walk. And a group got up and went out, and with the help from the missionary's wife, who knew the area and spoke the local language, they went out and started walking the paths around the missionary's home. Now, along one of the paths, they met a group of Maasai women going the other direction, and they stopped and did the regular greetings that are part of the Maasai culture. And then the Maasai women asked through the missionary's wife, who could interpret, where are you going? And the response, of course, was, well, we're just going for a walk. And the Maasai ladies smiled and said, yes, we understand, but where are you going? Well, we're just going for a walk. Yes, but where are you going? And finally came clear, the Maasai ladies had no concept, didn't have a mental category for just going for a walk. In a culture where walking is the main means of transportation, people don't just get up of an evening after supper and say, let's go out and take a stroll. If you go walking somewhere in Maasai culture, you're going somewhere, or else you wouldn't be out walking. And after the two groups separated, you could almost hear the Maasai ladies thinking as they went away, those crazy Americans, they go out and walk and don't go anywhere. One of the questions church leaders need to regularly ask ourselves is whether our churches are out for a walk or going somewhere. You see, just taking a walk for its own sake can be good for your physical health, but a church that's just out taking a walk, wandering around doing the things churches do because that's what churches do, that church is in real trouble. Elders, pastors, part of your task of spiritual leadership of your congregation is to see that your church is going somewhere. You can call it vision casting, goal setting, strategic planning, just plain thinking ahead. But whatever you call it, you, as the called top leadership tier of the congregation, need to be doing it and doing it regularly. When God called you to that leadership role, part of the package He put in your hand was that of leadership that takes the church somewhere. The New Testament calls both elders and local pastors shepherds. Now, if you know anything about shepherding, you know the primary job of a shepherd is to know where there's food, water, protection for the sheep, to gather the sheep together and lead them to the right places where they'll get their food, their water, and their protection. If a shepherd doesn't lead his flock, the flock scatters and becomes vulnerable and ultimately disappears. If you, pastor and elders, who are called by God to lead your congregation, don't fulfill that role faithfully, one of two things is going to happen. Either the church will fall into chaos as everybody just does their own thing, or else leaders who God has not called to lead the congregation will rise up and out of their own inner resources try to lead the congregation. And that's never a healthy situation. You need to see that the church is going somewhere, not just out for a walk. So let me ask you this. Could you, in 20 seconds, tell me where your church is going? In the next 3, 5, 7 years, you can set the time frame, but can you tell me where you believe God's called the church to go? And is that vision shared by the elder pastor team around you? Now, if you can articulate that 20-second vision, and it's the shared vision of your church's leadership, congratulations. You're in a very distinct minority and a very good one. And your job now is to figure out how to communicate that vision to your congregation, how to lay the steps that will lead to that vision, and how to get the congregation going on the path to which God's called them. But if you can't give that 20-second vision, and that's far more common among church leaders, what I want to ask you is, what are you going to do about that? Please don't tell me you're going to appoint a long-range planning committee. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but the primary leadership, the primary direction of God's church is meant to come through you, the pastor elder team. God put you at that level of top leadership so that you would understand that your task is to find the big picture direction toward which God is calling your congregation. Now, it doesn't take a big dramatic process to do this. If you'll just set aside the first 10 or 15 minutes of your regular meetings to just sit down and talk about what each one of you sees as the direction God is leading your church at this time and place, looking down the road 3, 5, 7 years, write those things down as people share their hearts, and then collate them together, come back and look at it again, and almost inevitably, within 3, 4 meetings at the most, you'll begin to see the outline of what God is speaking to the hearts of His ordained leadership in your congregation. Now, you need to confirm that vision in prayer after you put it together. You need to choose a strategy for communicating it to the church and begin to plan ways to move the church in that direction. But shepherd the flock to which God has called you. Lead as God leads you. I'm Doug Harvey, and this is DHF Elder Update.